So we may be moving a few of our agenda items around to accommodate individuals if they're not here yet. Right. As soon as he comes back, we're going to do an introduction since we have a few guests here. We'll do that. Well, I believe he is first.
I think I saw his name on the papers. You probably did.
Is he with the bear team?
No, he's with you.
Okay.
Bear team.
All right. So if we could, let's go around and see, we have a few new faces with us today, and if we could do introductions, please. Start right here.
Sure, Daniel Richardson, Deputy County Administrator.
Randy Hendo, Board of Supervisors.
Sherry Brennan, Board of Supervisors.
Don Ringen, Tuolumne County Building with us.
Sasha Farkas, Tuolumne County Farm Bureau.
Jim Maddox, Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors. Planning and Funds. Greg Gerstenberg. Jim Phelan with Tuolumne County RCD.
Alan Johnson, SWIFT Coordinator.
Sarah Correa, County Council.
Alex McClanion, Democrat. Michael DeMoss.
Mike Dietrich. Go ahead. Mike Dietrich, Deputy Incident Commander on the rim fire.
Mike, would you like to take a seat at our table, please? That was not like a fire or anything.
But he's not going to sit in it anywhere. Thank you.
All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Is there any public comment before we start the meeting? On a non-agenda item. Let me clarify that.
My comments were going to be on the 2-mile project.
Okay, which is on the agenda, so we'll catch those when we get to that item.
10 minutes, because we'll get them next time.
All right, very good.
I suggest we continue that.
Yes.
They were quite lengthy.
All right.
Many pages.
And given the circumstances in the last 3 weeks, we
Half of them are
understand.
typed up. They will be typed up.
Okay, very good. So that moves us to item 4, rimfire review and recovery.
That's it. Our public affairs person is supposed to be here.
I'll move the microphone down so he can. And you don't have to stand up. Well, whatever way you.
Okay. First, Mike Dietrich, Deputy Incident Commander with California Incident Management Team 5, currently managing the rim fire. I don't have my maps with me because our public affairs people were supposed to bring them, and they're on their way. However, most folks, I believe, are pretty aware of the maps and locations, and I just wanted to give a quick update, if that's okay.
Sure. Do you want to wait till your other folks get here, or do you want to go ahead and do that now?
It's up to the committee.
What works best for you?
It would be best for me to speak off of the map, and then we have a visual to connect to it. So,
Okay.
if that works.
That works.
Okay.
We're going to postpone item 4 for the moment. And go to item 5, which is consideration of correspondence on the Eagle Meadow road maintenance. Jerry Snyder is not here. I know that meeting was canceled. And just as an update, Supervisor Rutherford will be handling that. Under an abundance of caution, we've got to my attention, since our family does have a permitting area that I could have a potential conflict of interest. So Supervisor Rutherford will be updating us on that. He is in contact with the homeowners association, and I'm sure they will be rescheduling that meeting. And we'll have an update at our meeting. Item 6. Let's see Mr. Snyder here yet.
Hard to have a meeting when the players don't show.
He needs to be part of that discussion. So we will postpone that for the moment. Item 7, consideration of correspondence on the proposed endangered species designation of the yellow-legged frog and Yosemite toad. And before we open that up for comment, again, I would just like to give a brief update. 2 items in a row. Again, since the species in question could be on my family's allotment, I will be, Supervisor Hanfeld will be taking the lead on this. In an abundance of caution, I will be recusing myself until we get some clarification from the FPPC, which will be shortly coming. I would encourage Supervisor Hanfeld to be in close contact for additional comments with the Stanislaus grazing permittees. The president is Dick Geiser, and the California Cattlemen's Association. I think they can give you a lot of good information. Comments on that, deadline on that are November, Daniel, what are they, November?
It's only 20 days, I don't have exact date. But we have another month, maybe about 2 months.
Okay, so we can take the time to carefully draft comments and then bring those comments back to this committee in October. Would that be appropriate?
I'll just let you know that I got some comments from several of you here and talked to you. Appreciate your input. Of course, I'm not the scientist. I'm trying to draft your comments into this. And so today's discussion will be very helpful to know, are we heading in the right direction, or do we need to seek out additional science, or is the science satisfactory, what's out there? But that's the purpose of today, is to make sure the appropriate points.
Can I get an opinion from the council if I
Sure.
to step outside for a moment?
Yes, at this point, because we're going to wait for the FEBC to clarify, we'll go ahead and have you step out, and then we'll hopefully get an opinion before the next meeting.
Supervisor Hanfield, you're the chair.
Does that mean, do we still have a quorum?
You don't.
But
But
we're not
you're just
taking
giving
action.
comments, right?
Right, we're not taking any action.
Okay. Well, just a few comments. I talked to a member of Fish and Wildlife because of some of the comments I made about designation of critical habitat in this area. In effect, I said that the practice was that the land was basically taken off limits and thou shalt not enter kind of thing. They said, well, that's not true. And I pointed out to them the case, which I think we talked about last time, where Angeles National Forest, where in fact 1,000 acres were in fact taken off, and he said that's the Forest Service. So I don't know what's happening there. We need to figure out what's happening between the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife when they designate critical habitat. The wrong thing, in my opinion, is to just take it out of the game and not let anybody in there necessarily. We need to do the right things for the species so that, in fact, it can propagate and thrive. And just continue to let it overgrow puts it at risk for the things that we've just had happen. So I'm just not convinced we're applying good science to solve the problem, and we need to do that. So I'll work with Mr. Richardson and the other sources we have to do what we need to do and make pertinent comments, but I'm just nervous about how we fix the problem with the wrong solution. Mr. Maddox.
We can do that first.
First of all, Daniel, you're welcome to call me at any time, and if I can help, I'll try to do my best. To go along with what Supervisor Hanvelt just said, and I pointed this out to Daniel yesterday when I was speaking with him, by eliminating natural occurrences like lightning fires in the wilderness area, we're prohibiting fire from removing some of the trees that are encroaching on these meadow areas, which presumably are the critical habitat for the frog. And that's one of the issues. It's just really at the center of the whole thing. So I'm just concurring with what you said.
Okay, so we'll just continue item 7 for the next meeting, and we'll invite Supervisor Brennan back, and we'll proceed with item 4, which is rimfire review and recovery, because the Forest Service has shown up, and we'll let Mr. Dietrich speak to the map.
Is it okay to
Certainly.
speak into a microphone up here?
I don't know, do we have a hand mic?
It's in the
We'll see if we can find you a hand mic here, so.
All right.
You didn't know that part of your job description was star of stage and screen?
We'll bring back item 4, rimfire review and recovery. Mike.
Get him a microphone.
Oh, perfect. And actually, Mike, I'm sorry, before you start, I see some new faces have come in. Could we get some introductions?
Yes, Jerry Snyder, Forest Public Affairs Officer, and I brought an additional speaker that would be happy to talk with you to talk about our bear team. And Sherry Hazelhurst is a liaison officer, and she'd be willing to talk with you and give you some information about the bear team and what it is their team is hoping to get done within the next 20 days or so.
Perfect. Adam?
Larry, co-economic development.
Thank you, Larry. Mike?
Okay, first, thank you for having me come in and speak to the group today. I really do appreciate being guests in your community. And on behalf of Jerry McGowan, Incident Commander, of course, he'll be around long after we are. So just speaking on the current status, first, we view it as still a very serious situation. There's still a lot of unburned materials out there, although we've been witnessing those burn up during the day, and we're continuing to work on that. The weather, we'll always base our activities on weather activities. The temperature is going to be moderating a little bit, which means high temperatures will be a few degrees lower, and humidities will be a few % higher. And what does that mean in overall fire behavior differences? Instead of 10-foot flame lengths, they'll be maybe 9 feet. So they're still very serious in terms of fire potential out there. Okay, as far as the main activities, this area up here in Delta and Echo, still looking really good, and along this southern end of the fire in Alpha Bravo and into a little bit of Sierra. This is held pretty much in place. I'm not going to, excuse me, not going to elaborate too much on that. Division F still has some fire activity along the lines, and folks are continuing to mop up at least 100, 150 feet in, and it's looking pretty good. The activity that has had the most activities up on the north end of the fire, up in Kilo, Lima, and Zulu. Folks noticed yesterday there was a column that came up yesterday afternoon, went up to about 20,000 feet or so. And those are mainly unburned islands well within the fire perimeter, up to 1 mile to 2 miles in. And with yesterday's weather, if we look at this in 3D, column came up and essentially burned itself back into the fire. So any spots and materials that came in essentially landed in the fire area. So nothing too major on that, and we thank the weather folks for making that happen. Of course, with the change in the wind switch, or potential changes in wind switches coming out of the east-northeast, still the potential to move stuff around in here. Although most of the fire, most of the fuels have burned, so we'll anticipate some more of those smaller columns coming up in the next couple days, and we'll continue to be vigilant with that. We had a few reported spots up in Zulu and Lima, came in on the infrared, the night infrared that was up. We had crews out there gridding yesterday. We also had what's called our Cobra helicopter, which has thermal infrared on it as well and can get it a little bit lower. They were unable to locate any of those yesterday, so we continue to be vigilant up in this area. We've had a little bit of activity up in Mike, and these are burning up into the granite areas. So again, this is unopened, but we're having folks out there, hot shot crews, gritting, and then mopping up essentially rock to rock to rock, trying to tie things in and mopping back in. We continue to be monitoring this area in here. A little bit different story. Still quite active down here in Division Papa and Division Nora. Activities along the line still continuing to burn. They've had, based on the weather, they've had a couple of areas that have gotten a little warm, and the crews have been able to jump on those and continue to keep this in check. We currently have 10 or 11 aircraft assigned today, and a couple of heavies, a couple of mediums, and some lights. So we'll be continue. The air has been good for them to fly and be able to use water in support of the hand crew operations and engine operations. This is still looking pretty good down here in Romeo and Quebec. We still have crews that are patrolling and engines that are continue to mop up along this road down here. Okay, the future. Continue to do suppression damage repair up in this area with CAL FIRE. And they're getting fairly close to, I don't want to call it completion, but substantial completion over the next several days with continuing the repair work, water barring, and so on. Down on the main part of the fire, today was the first day we were able to get suppression repair activities worked into the incident action plan, and they're working in Alpha Bravo today to continue or start initiating the suppression damage repair according to the specifications and the repair plan. So anyway, that's a positive note that we're moving, and we want to move aggressively into the suppression repair. And we'll be switching resources around, moving out the heavier dozers for lighter dozers, excavators to tear stuff apart, and being able to get into those areas to begin the water bar work. We did have, in parts of the fire, we did have a bunch of trees that were felled and materials that were pushed up by dozers. We have excavators in there essentially pulling the piles apart to be able to get at the hot spots. Labor intensive, but it's necessary in order to make that happen. Let's see, continuing chipping along the main roads, removing the materials. I think they completed yesterday somewhere between 9 and 10 miles of chipping activity, getting rid of those materials. So that to me is very positive. Chippers chipping, excavators excavating, dozers dozing, and crews mopping, and so on. We'll continue with that. That's pretty much the update. Randy?
Yeah, just because we're filming this for use with the public, you might explain, you talked about water drops and you did mention retardant. Could you explain why we're not dropping retardant over on the Papa Nora area?
In top of Nora, I think we're up into the national park here, and we're very sensitive to parks needs on retardant and the I don't want to call it necessarily long-term impacts, but the long-term appearances of retardant. It takes forever for it to go away, and in many cases the color of the retardant doesn't go away. We feel that we can be still very effective with the heavy helicopters in terms of water drops in the area. Of course, if we needed to use retardant, we would, but it doesn't look like that'll be necessary at this point. And we're working with the National Park Service on essentially their equivalent of a land management plan and meeting their objectives as well. We're working for two masters on this, of course, Yosemite National Park and the forest. So we work for everybody, and we try to meet everybody's needs according to what they've been doing. The parks are still working in this area as well, hazard tree removal, and they're beginning to work on some of the suppression repair. And also along county roads, and I believe this is of interest, we'll be continuing to monitor for hazard trees as they come up, and we'll be felling them as they become apparent. Some of the ones that are obvious, we obviously will be working on those, as they pop up. And over time, some trees along the right-of-ways know that know that they're dead, but that just hasn't shown yet. So we'll be continue to monitor those during the activities and take them down as needed. So does that answer your question, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Has the estimated date for a full recovery or full containment?
We're still looking at the 20th as the estimated containment date. And as we continue to work through these areas, we'll be looking at and reevaluating if that's a realistic date or not. We'll give it a few more days to see where we're at, and we will make a sound decision on whether we need to bump that out or not. We're looking at the standards that the force has set to us is to get this, collapse it a little bit, shrink the organization, and then move into smaller teams of folks potentially to work on different parts of the incident, doing the suppression repair. Okay.
One more thing. You're still talking 80% containment?
Yeah, we're looking at 80% containment still, and probably will be holding that number for the next several days. We know that even though we have black up here, folks like to see the black lines across the top. We have had spots that have come up and have dropped fire as far up as a mile and a half out. So I think we want to stay with that number at this point, at least for the next several days, and reevaluating that containment number. Some parts will never be able to really get true containment on them just because of the nature of the topography that it's in, the rocks, and so on. So as Alan knows very well, that becomes very difficult when you work on that containment number. Current costs, I think we broke, or the incident broke the $100 million mark today.
And one more comment. 80% tends to build into the public a lot of confidence because, we're almost there. But this fire is so big, you've still got many miles of open fire line.
Yeah, that's a kind of an interesting concept, and thank you for bringing that up. The concept of containment is you've stopped the forward spread of the fire. I'm not sure the exact total numbers of miles of perimeter, but I still think we have pretty close to, just looking roughly, probably pretty close to about 30 miles, which on any other fire would be a big number, but it doesn't seem that way right now, just because of math. So 80%, we feel pretty confident on the fuels in here. This is kind of a mosaic. There's still a lot of green trees up here, but the way that the fire was seeded in here and the way it's been burning around, it's pretty much an understory burn in here. So the ground fuels are out. The 1,000 hours are burning to hot ash, and we have had a few injuries in those areas. So we're kind of leery about putting folks in because of potential burns, and you'll be walking on what you think is solid ground, and all of a sudden you'll end up up to your knee or ankle. And so our crews are very cautious on that. We don't want that to happen. We've had a couple of burn injuries as folks have been moving into the fire perimeter, and we want to minimize that. So that's where we're at.
I think it'd be nice to get an update from the bear team, and then I know there's a couple questions. California Fish and Game is here. I know we wanted to have a discussion of, kind of about some of the deer herds out there and what will be coming up in the next month. I hope can you stay with us for a few more minutes?
I'd be flattered.
Okay, thank you.
Flattered to stay with the group. No, that's why we're here.
We could have some questions when we get to some conversation.
Yeah, also, our team will be supporting the bear team with whatever needs they need, especially providing that aspect of safety for those folks that aren't familiar with the territory. So we'll be providing some support to them, and we'll be working together. Our mission is put the fire out and go home. Their mission is to help clean it up, and so with that point, like I said, we'll be working very closely with the bear folks and have done that in the past. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sherry. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Are you all familiar with the Forced Bear Program? Have you all heard about that a little bit?
About 3 days ago.
The public may not be,
Right.
since you're being filmed.
Okay.
You might want to go through a brief explanation.
Okay. This is the Burned Area Emergency Response Program, And basically, we talked a little bit about fire and the fire suppression rehab. So basically what they're doing right now is going back through, and every place they've been with dozers or helicopters, or they've had staging areas and things like that, they're repairing that damage that happened just coincident to putting out the fire. What we do with the burned area response team is try and identify the values at risk. So we're looking for things like communities downstream of large water bodies that may see an increase in flow because there's no vegetation to help infiltrate that water this next season. We may be looking at, our primary goal is protecting life and property. So any place that life or property is at risk from our next season's worth of storms is our most urgent need for taking care of the landscape. So that's what we're here to try and do. It's really to try and get treatments on the ground for this next year's worth of environmental storms that may occur. So we've got a team of about 70 folks here, mostly from California, but there's some from out of state as well. And there are a lot of specialists: hydrologists, soil scientists, geologists, biologists, botanists. And what they're doing is breaking up into teams. And yesterday they took a look at these maps. We have some preliminary estimates on how severe the fire was to the ecosystem, and that's a little bit different measure than what the fire folks usually use. And for the ecological perspective, we're looking at how much consumption did they have of all of the materials, and how much did that affect the soils. So in some of the areas here, we've got some plants that extract some saps and things like that that make it really hard for water to penetrate the soil after a very severe burn. So in those areas, we call that hydrophobic, and we're trying to do something to hopefully prevent that and allow the water to infiltrate. So especially where that happens above a community or a building, a road, the water infrastructure that we have for Hetchy and some of the others, those are some major places that we're going to look at to make sure that that water can get into the soils and still function like a normal forest would. So those are some of the emergency things we're looking at right now. The teams are just getting on the ground for the first time today. There was a flight yesterday, and they were able to look and verify some of our preliminary information. We try and focus on the high severity areas to the moderate severity. Usually the low severity areas are like a nice underburn, like he was talking about up here. If you get that, we've still got ecological conditions intact enough to support natural water flows. So the teams today are headed out along this road here, down through here, and over to Drew Camp, I believe. So that's the strategy for today. They're working on the plan for tomorrow, and we'll see how far they get. They do have timber crews working with them to help fall some of the down trees and hazard trees along the way to keep them safe. So that's our initial plan, and we're going to try and get as much of this done as possible within the next 20 days. And then that process, we're going to come to the public with some meetings. We have one tonight, identified 7 to 9 p.m., and that was invitation of county, municipal, local partners.
That's a stakeholder.
To some degree, yeah, limited stakeholders. We're not doing a full public meeting. And mostly it's because we don't have a whole lot of information to share. So I think next week we're going to start planning some more of the public meetings that you're more accustomed to for the greater stakeholder community. So what we'll try and get tonight is some more information from all of you experts about the things out here that really matter that we need to take care of. And we'll explain a little bit more about the BEAR process and introduce you to a few more BEAR team members. So basically, once we've figured out where we think are some areas that need to have some immediate treatment, we will talk with the forest supervisor and make some recommendations to her, and then she would request any of those potential treatments going forward to the regional forester, and if it exceeds a dollar amount, it would go to the chief of the Forest Service.
It'll exceed that dollar amount, we know that.
It's possible.
This is 400 square miles.
Yeah, it's a big fire.
So Sherry, when do you anticipate actually some folks could be getting out there and doing some treatment on the ground? like on a calendar perspective?
So if they go out today and identify something that we see as an urgent, got to take care of right away, we could come back to the forest supervisor tomorrow and say, you know, Susan, we really recommend you get started on this. And that may take a couple of days. And then depending on how the work would get done, if it's with local crews, it could happen quickly. If it's through contract, it could take a little bit more time. But, you know, maybe 7 to 10 days at the earliest to get some actual work on the ground.
Okay, but the bulk of the work that you're going to be suggesting, when would you see that starting? You said 20 days to get through your report period?
To get to a report. So if we found something really urgent that needed to be taken care of, that would start the process. So we could build on that in little increments as we go, or we could wait and do one big report. We'll just have to see what makes most sense to get work done. And the work can continue up to the first year. So it depends on exactly where the treatments would take place, how easily accessible it is, the type of treatment that needs to occur on the ground, how complicated that is or easy, and how many people we can get mobilized quickly.
What's the cost number that triggers national attention?
We have thresholds for the regional foresters approval, and I think we're at 100 million for the west, I think. I'd have to look that up.
Well, the cost of the fire is 100 million. I expect that the cost of recovery is...
I'm sorry, you're right. That I think it's what is it, 2 million? I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, the cost of recovery will exceed that. We're concerned because it is the watershed and it feeds water to TID, MID. It has immense impacts on everything in our area. Concerned about urgency to do this. We can expect rain anytime, say, October 15th. That's not uncommon for us to get a serious rain, and that obviously, with hydrophobic foils, we have a big problem. And I've personally been out there, so I've seen some of this. So, I mean, we feel a sense of urgency, and 7 to 10 days eats into about a 30-day program or urgency period. So is there any way we can, I'm interested in accelerating, as you probably know.
And we'll do the best we can to figure out where some of those areas might be. What we try and do is take a comprehensive look as well, so that we're addressing the most important and most urgent places first. So we will try and do that, and that the crews are well aware of that. And we'll have to see what they come back with tonight, and maybe we'll have updates in the next few days. We are going to host our interagency meeting at 11 o'clock again on Thursday, like we did on Monday, so we can provide you some more updates on Thursday as well.
I think Supervisor Hanfield really just said it. We're very concerned that we be expediting. We know we have a huge landscape out there that it's baked. And we're looking at a calendar, and if we, follow your timeline out, you might not be through the process before October 8th, 10th, somewhere in there, and we could be looking at our first rains within a matter of weeks. Very little time to get out there and really get some effective work done there. And so, again, we cannot emphasize the message loudly enough that we are very concerned about expediting. We know there's a process that you have to go through. We understand that. But any place where it can be pushed along, we need to be getting that done.
Absolutely. And we're going to work with those water providers as well. We did meet last night with one of them. So we're trying to get on top of those because we know they are especially urgent.
Two more comments, and that is normal procedures are fine for normal conditions. These are not normal conditions. And so I feel like we need to remember that even when the fire's gone, that emergency's gone, and that we still have an emergency from an environmental point of view, and we need to stay on it. It tends to lose its impact with the public, and I might add with legislators and the powers that be, because it doesn't present the imminent danger that we know fire is, but it's still an imminent danger and a big impact. So how do we maintain a sense of urgency and maybe even a state of emergency with the federal government, so in fact the normal rules of operation can be dispensed with. This is a different kind of war, but it's still a war. So I'm thinking of the NEPA rules. We can't afford to take 2 years to do NEPA to deal with this problem, and so we need to be able to bypass this. I mean, this isn't rocket science that we need to do something, and most of it's been done before on a smaller scale. And I'm talking to people who've been in the area, have seen the area, and while I appreciate that there are green islands out there, some of those are getting burned over. But the estimate was out of the 250+ thousand acres, that there's about 150,000 that's toast, and that is an immense problem. We won't be able to solve all that problem by the time it rains, but we need to get the effort to maximize it, and that's really what we're interested in, maximizing the effort, and this effort of recovery will take years, and we need to do it right. And I'm interested in how you engage the locals to help you, because you have local knowledge here that we don't want to waste.
Absolutely. And that's a very good question. And this is a challenge no matter which fire we're on, where. I think Susan Skalski, your forest supervisor, is going to be on top of this for the next several years, and this will be part of what the forest is working on. The long-term restoration and rehabilitation of this is not just a quick few-month issue. It's multiple years. And so she and her staff are going to be working with you all locally to help figure out, the BEAR team just provides some emergency response. So beyond that, the question is, what ecological values do you really want to sustain out on this landscape? Which are you best able and equipped to deal with immediately? And how do we phase those in over time? So I'm sure those are questions that she's going to be bringing to you and talking over some options going forward. I'm sure there are many options, and it's an opportunity for you to help frame the forest of the future at this point.
Well, I'm going to give you a suggestion.
Okay.
Susan is a capable person, and she has a forest to manage even after this is done.
Absolutely.
The good news is we still have a good portion of the forest left to take care of. And while this is the Tuolumne watershed, I get concerned about the Stanislaus watershed, which is also in our county. But Susan can't do this by just Susan. And I'm suggesting that the region or the nation give us a different kind of incident command team to deal with the immense problem, and that we consider that. And that they can report to Susan all they want, but whatever the command structure is. But Susan can't do this and still manage the forest. It's a full-time job to manage the forest. We need to think about doing things different than the way we normally do things. This is extraordinary conditions. I'll throw that out as a suggestion.
Okay.
She needs that help, and the regional people need to try and give her that help, as well as the people in Washington.
Thank you for that suggestion. We'll share that.
That might be an action item that we come up with at the end of the item, that we communicate that with her, that, there has been a lot of discussion about the need for an incident team to go in. I mean, because, the capability for our local forest is vast. It's taxed out. And so the ability to bring in other professionals, when we look at that landscape out there, and we don't even we can't put our arms around yet how many hundreds of million board feet of dead, completely toasted timber is
Tri-billion.
Right. It is going to take, just like this unique team has been brought in, it will take a unique team to come in and assist this forest in getting that job done. Doesn't mean that we don't have faith in the folks that are here, but the manpower to sustain that kind of effort is more than what the ability is for this force, at least from what they have expressed in the past, when we talked about just them getting 25 million board feet out. So now we're talking about hundreds of million board feet in a very, very short time frame. So, again, that could be an action item that we take after this discussion. while we're here, we also have Mr. Kurtzenberg. Thank you. And Jim Maddox and Jim Phelan. And Jerry, I think they've got some questions, and they would like to talk about kind of some of the wildlife impacts from this fire, and again, if there's any action items that this committee can take, so. Just what your concerns are.
Okay. Just so you know, so I'm the wildlife management supervisor for the Sierra side within the central region. And I'm also the project leader for a deer study that's been going on at Jawbone Ridge, which is kind of in the center of the fire area.
Could you just show us on the map?
Yes. So our study area for deer has been right here. That's on the winter range portion of the Tuolumne deer herd, the Jawbone portion. And those deer migrate through and migrate up into this area up here. So currently we have 56 transmitter deer that are out there that either are within the fire area, on the edge of the fire area, or on the summer range up high that will be migrating down into the fire burned area this fall. And the migration will occur anytime from November through December, depending upon winter weather events forcing them down through. So we have some concerns about basically what they're going to come into. So obviously there's aspects that we're trying to work with on it. I've heard people say fire's normal, fire's expected, and yes, it is. Wildlife is impacted. We know that. But in this case, it's not normal. It's the heat and the size of the impact area is very different than most fires that we generally have on the west slope of the Sierras. So we're concerned about what the wildlife is going to, the impacts that are short-term, the impacts that have occurred, impacts that are short-term in the future, impacts that are long-term. We haven't had a lot of involvement in this, and primarily kind of from my position, we've been offering to help. I hear from various people that, well, they're in the crisis mode, which you have been. This is a huge crisis. How to actually become involved has been kind of a difficult part, because the state of emergency was for fire suppression. It wasn't for fire suppression and resource assessment and recovery. So we've been kind of somewhat out of the loop on it, and we have personnel that have expertise in wildlife resources, so I guess I'm offering up for help. And I know Nathan is involved in the BEAR program, one of three in the environmental portion dealing with the wildlife. So when I see that, I don't know if that's enough, and I guess I'm offering up that if there's more needed, because in 20 days to assess the impacts of that entire area that's a lot of work. And I'm hoping we can actually get maybe an official request, because he has another job to do, and we need to at least say, okay, this is your assignment. So as far as impacts to wildlife, again, they're going to come down. There's closure areas for, and let me just focus on deer for just a minute here. There's closure areas for all people to stay out of. Deer season opens up in like a week and a half from now. We have 3 deer populations that are in our what we call Zone D6: the Stanislaus deer herd, the Tuolumne deer herd, and the Yosemite deer herd. The closure area will effectively keep people out of the Yosemite and the Tuolumne deer herd. So there will be, unless there's changes, there will be no harvest in those 2 deer herds. And if the deer are arriving in a place that's severely impacted, we do want harvest, because otherwise there's just going to be more competition for the available forage that's left. So we do want to have some harvest. Otherwise we're going to have more, there's a greater potential for impacts as far as competition for forage and then starvation effects. So we're trying to work with how can harvest still occur, and we're asking for help, at least in being able to work with the closures. We know that there's necessary parts of having closures. There's reasons for closures, but where the closures could allow for hunter harvest, then it would actually help wildlife in the long run.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Because I've heard a number of folks talk to the concern that, so those two herds would be closed off now. That would mean all of the hunting activity would be going on in just the Stanislaus population. And Jim, I think you shared that it has actually the lowest buck ratio.
Right.
No
ratio.
ratios of the 3 here.
So that interpretation means that it probably is not the, I don't want to use the word strongest, but its numbers are.
It's not the one that needs
Can
the
it
most
sustain,
pressure.
exactly,
Yes.
can it sustain that kind of pressure?
So last week, we as the Department of Fish and Wildlife were trying to review, could we make changes and what changes could occur as far as hunting, tag exchanges, various ideas to reduce the pressure, reduce the number of tags. And within the Fish and Game regulations, the tag exchange cannot occur until once the earliest season has opened. And so we could not exchange tags because the season had already opened. So that was not allowed. That's a regulation that's in place, and that would require the commission, Fish and Game Commission, to make a change to that, which would be enacted after the start of deer season, sometime in about mid-October. So we're kind of restricted there. So the other option would be to completely close D6, but we do want harvest, so we didn't want to completely close it. So we're the one thing on West Slope Sierra habitats is, generally speaking, the harvest is because of the thick terrain, thick cover, it's very difficult to overharvest. But in this case, we have a much greater number of potential hunters that would be in an area. So we're hoping that we can actually have some flexibility within the closures to redistribute hunters after maybe the first couple of weeks, which are usually the lowest harvest after opening weekend, which is the highest single dates. There's low harvest until there's some kind of weather event. So we're hoping that there'll be some flexibility to at least redo some of the closure areas after some time period in October.
A couple of comments and a question. One of them comments is, I know from being at Incident Command every morning, listening to what's going on in the safety messages, that country out there is very, very dangerous. I know that they've had an increased number of accidents among trained firefighters and stepping into stump holes and getting burned, and you know, containment doesn't mean controlled and doesn't mean out, and it isn't going to be out until I think we get a good winter storm out there, unfortunately, and it's immense territory. So my concern is hunters and their safety. Just walking around that area, I personally have great concern about any member of the public untrained in that kind of activity being out there, and then of course the exhilaration of the hunt and doing something if you'll pardon the expression, dumb or stupid and getting hurt and seriously hurt. So I'm concerned about that. That's one comment. And then...
Can I reply on that one first? The closure area includes the entire Groveland district. So basically all the way down on the Merced River.
Oh, okay.
And so,
there are portions I know the Forest Service is already looking at opening, so.
Okay, so but there's large areas within the closure that are not within the black area. So and that's what really we're looking at, because the deer are not going to go into the black, and
okay, that's what that was my second question. I thought deer were a little smarter than that. You know, they don't eat the dirt in my yard; they just eat all the plants.
They will go there. With entering accuracy, they will go back to where they came from, but then they're going to be looking for somewhere.
And that's what I figured they'd do. So hopefully that's true. I am concerned about that. I've seen severe damage in there to the wildlife, and it hurts to see that. But
and we're not asking to open up black areas.
Well, because again, it's a public thing. We need to have this conversation.
Right. No, that's very good. Thank you. Long-term impacts, though, we've seen impacts from the previous fires that have occurred. When the 87 complex fire went through, the deer populations that wintered in the area that were impacted did not recover after the fire. They actually were very stable until 1993 when we had adenovirus go through the population. They dropped significantly after that and then stayed low, even lower, and very stable. So the concern here for long term is that we don't end up with a additional drop in populations, wildlife populations, and just some of the things that we've seen in our deer study over the last 4 years have to do with areas that these deer have migrated through in previous fires. And one of the things is just the jackstraw effect of timber is a barrier to migration. So any way that at least areas that are high important migratory corridors can be maintained open is definitely a benefit for wildlife.
So the trees are hazard trees for the wildlife, is what you're telling us?
Yeah, when you don't get in and remove trees and they all lay down, nothing can walk through it.
Including biologists, he's trying to
Yes.
Oh, are you suggesting there's another species that may be endangered because of this?
The deer was, it ran into a lion.
Tell me, we've had a presentation by our trapper here who has lamented what I'll call the demise of some of our migratory deer herds, and he talked about recruitment of fawns being seriously low. And how does the fire impact that?
We're going to learn a lot.
The answer is we don't know, but we're going to learn.
We don't know. It's after the 87 complex fire, we did not have pre-data and post-data. We didn't have a study going on at the time. The nice thing about this is we've had 4 years of radio telemetry work prior to it. We have 56 transmitter deer out there in the field that are going to be entering this burned area. And I have a pile of collars sitting in my office that were planned to go on deer this winter that I'm hoping will actually be able to go on deer and that we can find them and they don't just move right through. So we don't know much about the total impacts.
Okay, what about the 56 you got out there? Have you found them all? Are they still there?
No, we have to get an airplane up because a lot of them are in the immigrant wilderness, and we can't fly, obviously, because
it's a no-fly zone.
There's other airplanes that take precedence over us. So.
Some of them have guns.
Well, so that's what
Very well. I'm probably going to go on brain lock. There's a couple of things that I did want to mention while the Bear team is here. Well, one of them particularly, I want to second what Randy said about a need for a paradigm shift as far as our thinking on fires of this magnitude. The the 87 complex fire pales in comparison to the size of this one. And I can't really speak to, I'm sure our incident command people can do it, but I can't really speak to the overall effect upon the entire area as far as burn is concerned. I did have a day out in the field with Fish and Game and in the Jawbone area, and there are a lot of moonscapes out there, and it's going to have a serious long-term impact on wildlife as well as any other uses of the forest. So, you know, we're going to have to think big. We're going to have to think differently. And it goes for all of us. And I've done a little bit of soul searching with some of my thoughts, and in time maybe I'll even talk about them. Another thing, though, that I did want to mention as far as the bear team is concerned, those whatever green areas, green islands that we have throughout the burn are going to be extraordinarily valuable for wildlife. More because they do allow for some of the smaller animals that don't have the benefit of wings to live within the fire, and ultimately to pioneer back out into some of the areas that have been totally blitzed. And I speak from some experience there in a Granite Creek fire, because back in that time there were some areas that were green and they were retained. I know there was some question as to whether or not the trees were actually dead and still standing, and fortunately for wildlife, they made the decision to take a chance on some of them, and it made a big difference. I know it did out there. And we're talking about something that's just logarithmically larger. So if there's any way that we can retain those islands, we need to do it. Beyond that, we're going to learn an awful lot about fire as far as wildlife is concerned here, if we just pay attention to what's happening. But I'm very grateful that Greg came here and talked with the group too.
I hope we're afforded the opportunity to put the resources financially and otherwise out there so that we can, in fact, learn the lessons that need to be learned. I think that's an important thing not to lose sight of. So I just add that to your comment.
And another thing, too, that certainly occurs to me, we need to learn from this fire here for the whole West Slope Sierras, because we are living with the same powder keg from one end to the other, and this same fire could occur in another place, and it will occur in another place if we don't start thinking bigger.
One more comment just on habitat projects. We had been working with the Forest Service on a habitat project on Jawbone Ridge, and we had kind of a vision of what we thought would be good to protect primarily the oaks. That was our primary interest, was to protect the oaks from a future wildfire. Work would have started this fall or next spring, or so we were a little late on that. But even if we had done the work, what we learned from this fire showed us that it would not have worked. What we thought we were going to try to do probably would not have been effective. Not with this type of a fire. So that's the part that I think we can learn and actually apply to future areas, or in this area at a future time.
And those discussions in the future will be very important, because the reverse of that was the work that SWIFT did was incredibly critical for saving those communities. SWIFT just gets tremendous credit for the work that they did paid off. And it really, I know a lot of CAL FIRE folks directly attributed their ability to get in and save those communities to the work that you guys have done.
And it's all the agencies that are involved with that.
Absolutely.
Including the Resource Conservation District had a hand in that. The Fire Safe Councils had a hand in that, along with the RAC had.
Right. Are there any other questions for the BEAR team? Or Jerry, did you have any comments to make additional? Yeah.
Just one additional thing on the fire. The forest, I retired as a district FMO at Groveland, and the forest brought me back, and I've spent the last week or so. So there is some other things going on out there. I've been working with a gentleman from the Pacific Northwest Research Station, and we're actually going out and looking at where there were fuel treatment projects done on the ground and what effect the fire had on those treatments, to be able to maybe say what's successful and what we may need to change in the future. Obviously, some of those treatments were thins, but then the prescribed burning after the fact didn't get done. And looking at the differences of where the full prescription was done from the thinning to the burning, and the effects the fire had on it, or the opportunities that the firefighters may have been able to utilize to get in there because of the reduced fuels. So there'll be a report coming out on that too, and I'll make sure when it comes out, I'll end up with a copy.
That's great. Can you come back and give us a quick pitch on that? See how
I'll see what I can do. He's off right now, and we'll be back on.
And just comment, to add to that, I hope that maybe there will be some look at some of the private grounds that have been managed, and how well did they sustain, I mean, through this fire as opposed to the neighboring forest.
Yeah, and I did recommend that he talk with SPI about their stuff out in the granite burn, because so far the areas that we've mainly are looking at is we're looking at the Forest Service treatments out in the old granite burn, the area around peach growers, Middle Fork treatments that were done, and up in Bear Mountain. Those are the primary areas we've looked at this last week. So, but I have encouraged him to take a look and contact with SPI on some of their treatments out there.
One more comment. Some of the people that some of the people I've talked to who are knowledgeable on this comment on some of our thinning projects they felt weren't aggressive enough. Are you going to be able to look at that and to give us an indication? They just felt we weren't taking enough of the existing material out of the area. They thought we had to be taking more so that in fact it would be more effective in producing a ground fire as opposed to a crown fire.
He is looking at all of that as part of his research. You got to remember that it's hard to compare this fire because it was under such extreme conditions, and what might have been effective on an average day of a wildfire in that project area, it may have been successful on an average day, but with the extreme conditions, it had no effect. So it's kind of a balancing game of how you really judge what was done and what's effective.
So maybe we'll expect a recommendation on what kind of conditions we should expect as opposed to expecting normal. Fires are never normal. So maybe we need to think about how aggressive we are and what our design event is, if you will.
And like I said, he'll have a report coming back, and I'll make sure that gets to this committee when it comes back.
Are there any other questions or comments from the folks? Yeah.
You know, I was on a portable. Yeah. I was on a Farm Bureau field trip. Jerry Snyder was able to take us up Highway 120. We did look at a thinning that was completed about a year ago. I think the only reason why it did work is because there was a break in the tree canopy from Highway 120. And the thinning was still very dense, even though the understory was gone, and it did allow the fire to creep through there slowly. Because there were some trees crowning on the other side of the highway, that break in the canopy is what caused the fire to go back down to the ground. So I think the thought of aggressively thinning needs to be looked at in some areas to force fire back to the ground. And I'm not a fire expert, but looking at what is green and maybe why it's still green it's pretty obvious. So something to consider.
I kind of, when we were out, the day that we were out on Jawbone, I kind of had that same feeling, Sasha, that some of the plantations, they were certainly thinned. but the fire just got in the crown and it just took everything as it went up the hill. And if there were some way of forcing it back to the ground, that's what you're saying there, forcing it back down to the ground, starving it for fuel and making it be a ground fire. Some of those plantations that we looked at, the fire was just working its way through the understory, and it was a good fire there. But we lost plantations, whole plantations, because it crowned and it just stayed in it. So I think you're right.
Well, I think that he kind of answered what my question is, but there's been a great amount of bad information during this thing, people saying things that they really don't know about. But I heard from a fairly reputable person that this fire broke all of the known protocol of fires, the methods and so on, and I'm just wondering, is that true? I mean, is this a completely different situation than what is normally seen?
Protocols, you mean fire behavior characteristics? Yeah, right. When you get into these epic droughts, it all depends on the, to me, it all depends on the part of the country that you're working in. When you start hitting the, as they call them, energy release components and all the technical things in terms of low fuel moistures and severe weather conditions, I'm not sure what, if it's breaking records or if it's just setting a new trend in these things that are called mega fire type things. And Alan, I think you're familiar with that, because we're seeing unprecedented fire behavior all across the country, whether it's in the Los Padres National Forest or the Angeles. We've seen it in Colorado, we've seen it in Arizona, New Mexico, and in Montana. So I think it's just shifting the trend of a new normal, which I think will likely, as I listen, not I personally, but as I've read the research, just shifting the severity of it based on fuel conditions. Some people can argue climate change and other factors that go into it. So we're in a different world. It wasn't too long ago that it was uncommon to have a 10,000 acre fire and have it be considered the worst fire of the decade. And now we're seeing fires repeatedly that are up over 100,000 acres in size. And so I'm not sure if it's we're breaking new protocols or just exacerbating the trend that we've seen over the last 5 to 15 years, depending on which part of the country you're in.
I would like to take a little issue with you on that, because if you look at cause and effect and you look at the history, we used to pull 130 to 180 million board feet out of the Stanislaus, and in the last 20 years we've averaged less than 25 million board feet. Okay. When you got a forest that is growing, you can argue about the number, but the low side number is 225 million board feet a year, and the mortality exceeds the harvest. You're going to build fuels in there, and so I think and I read all your reports every day, and every report and every briefing says this is a fuel-driven fire. I believe we've allowed our forests to overgrow themselves to their own demise, and I'm more than willing to I would love to find that I'm wrong on that, but I don't believe that's the case. Well, you put enough fuel out there, the fire is going to burn, and I think that's the real problem that we've got. It isn't climate change. So, I mean, 2 years ago, we had a significant winter on this forest, and we've got so much canopy cover that the water's not getting to the ground, and 65% of it's through transpiration is going east and not staying on our forest floor. So our forest floor is dry, and we've had 2 years of drought. That contributes, but it's fuel buildup, and we have to, if you get rid of that variable in the equation, then I'll start listening to comments about other causes and contributing factors.
I will stand corrected at an incident commander should not comment on climate change. So.
Well, I appreciate your opinion, and we know there are contributing factors. We had some temperature changes during the day, some humidity changes that allowed some change in the fire behavior and gave you guys some opportunity to gain some successes. but I do agree with Supervisor Hanfield that at some point we have to have a very serious, honest discussion about the fuel loading. As Jim pointed out, it's not here. We're talking about Sierra-wide. And so for the benefit of all of our neighbors up and down the Sierra Nevada mountain range, we have to get to a place where we are willing to have a very honest discussion about what the fuel loading conditions are out there.
But one of the things, and if you look at this map, if you look at the map on the table, most of the area within the burn has burned within the last 25 years.
Now, and I agree with that, but a lot of that, when the salvage timber was taken out, was not reforested, and we had tremendous brush fields out there. Tremendous. So again, that's fuel.
Yeah.
And tremendous fuel loading out on that landscape. And I think that is, again, a testament for the need to get out there and do the restoration work. It doesn't mean just taking that salvage out. It means getting some dollars to do the restoration work so that we're not up against this and looking at a similar scenario in 25 years instead of over what was the Stanislaus complex footprint. Now we're looking at the rimfire footprint, and we can expect it to expand beyond those boundaries. So, again, I take exception that we can say fuel loading may have been timber, may have been brush. Right. We know
I'm not,
the tonnage to the acre was astronomical out there.
I agree. And it just happened, I happened to catch something on the news early on in the incident where they were focusing on about, the 100 years of fire suppression activity is the reason why we're having these mega fires like this, and people not understanding that most of this area had burned in the past 25. So it wasn't the suppression action that was the cause of this fire going that big. I mean, it's a combination of things. It's the fuel buildup, and it was the extreme conditions at the time.
Okay, so taking us back on topic, because I know some of our visitors have other places to be and have a lot of folks that are interested in their time. Are there any more questions for Sherry or Mike or Jerry? You're going to be able to stay with us for our next. Yes. Okay. Any more questions for any of these folks? Are you going to be able to stay with us? Yeah.
I've got I guess a comment because of the severity of it. There's a lot of the severity of this fire. I was around on the complex fire and I helped afterward. What I see is we got to remove the fuels that are out there that got burnt. A lot of those, we got to do a good salvage logging operation and get those fuels out of there. And some of our plantations and stuff that we had out there, some of them did get thinned, but like we said, I don't think they got thinned enough, or if there should be actually breaks in between where it's not a solid canopy cover. Or with the YSS, we went out by Peachtree and looked at some areas out there that they have records from 1911 where it was a 29% canopy cover, and when we were there a few months ago, that canopy cover was 89%. And the amount of canopy cover and the amount of fuels that were out there, I believe, is the cause, the major cause of this expanding so great over what the complex was even. And like they said, we had other fires in here, but our forests have not been taken care of, or we shouldn't be having fires like this. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a couple. I think James is right. It's West Slope Sierra, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's at least forest-wide in the western United States as far as overgrown forests. I can't speak for the eastern part of the country, but the western part of the country, definitely, I think we've been loving our forests to death by not keeping them thinned enough. One of my major concerns, and I spoke to the Board of Supervisors here a few weeks ago, is like our brush fields. We can't really harvest them. We need to have some program where we can go in and thin them however way we can do it. I don't think any of this country is, you can go in and mechanically thin brush fields on, what, 90-degree slopes, or I think fire's the only way. But we're fighting a multi-problem area in that with the California Air Resources Board, for one. We need to burn. How are we going to do it, folks?
We have to be able to use that tool, and that's the problem that we run into. I've seen habitat projects that were denied because the forest had burned in 300 and some odd acres or whatever it was for the day. We've got to be talking in thousands of acres, not hundreds of acres.
I'll just point out to you, for 25 days.
What's that?
For 25 days, our air quality has been dramatically, severely challenged, and we've put more smoke and particulate matter in our atmosphere than we could have ever done if we'd have managed it right. Yeah.
All the winter. Yeah, that's the point, Randy. And I think it should have become abundantly clear to everybody that you're going to pay for it now or you're going to pay for it later. You need to do the burning at the time of the year when it causes the least problems. And we need to do a whole lot more of it.
So if there's no more general discussion, I want to bring this back to the committee and look and see if there is an action item in the form of some communication with a few the folks that are out there, because I heard a couple of things. I heard that a recommendation for an incident command type team, bringing resources from out of the area to look at a salvage harvest. A group of folks with some expanded expertise. I heard about the need for maybe some further discussion between California Fish and Game and the Bear team, and maybe more directly our forest supervisor, the SO's office. Is there anything else? Jim, I think your point is well taken, that at some point, I don't know if it's today, but that we agendize an item where we talk about communication with some of the other state agencies and the need for, the ability to do some control burns. I'm sure they'll be well aware of the statistics, but again, if communication needs to go forward from the county board to try and help promote that discussion, hopefully in action. But I guess I see that as a separate agenda item after the fire's out and we've started some of the recovery process.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I heard an offer today from Fish and Wildlife, the gentleman sitting across the table from me, and I hope that the Bear team will take advantage of him and abuse his time to the best benefit of the forest.
So is there an agreement on an action item, or are we going to table it? Well, I'm looking for, but I'm looking for input from the committee, especially with response to, I think it is appropriate to send a letter requesting an incident, some expanded team to deal with this salvage situation.
Don't we only have 2 teams that are even able to go out and mark trees right now? I mean, and
Seems like that was something that I heard sometime back.
Well, that was on one of our field trips, I thought.
Yeah.
I think we need a lot more than that now.
Madam Chairman, I suggest that we write the letter and we we encouraged the incident team. We encouraged the use of fish and increased fish and wildlife. We increased local support, local resources, that we look for an emergency declaration to expedite the need to deal with this problem and the expected impacts of the winter on this, and that we support funding from whatever source needs to come from, whether it be state or federal, to deal with the magnitude of this issue. And I would ask that staff draft such a letter for your review and signature.
Was this to the
The
letter?
letter would probably be to the forest supervisor, but I think we should copy the regional forester, incident command, and our legislators, both state and federal. And we might include Vilsack, Tidwell, and the Park Service in that as well.
So moved. And Daniel, can we get that letter together so we can have it at our board meeting next Tuesday?
Certainly do so, sure.
All right.
With your help.
And we may need to agendize something there, but you can work with Craig to do that.
Yeah, I can get it.
Okay.
All right. I want to thank
Do
everybody.
we need to vote on that?
Aye. I want to thank everybody that came and participated in the conversation. It helps us a lot to hear from you, and appreciate your time.
Appreciate being here. Thank you.
And let's not forget, 80% containment doesn't mean we're done. Continue to support our fire team, support our bear team, and anybody else trying to get us out of this mess. We need to support them.
All right. Next item. And Jerry's still here. Good.
I think we need to do 2 Mile while
That's
Jerry's
it.
here.
Consideration of correspondence on the draft environmental assessment for the 2 Mile Ecological Restoration Transportation Project. Jerry, can you have a seat with us up here? Or? All right. So in the packet, does everybody have a copy of this? There is the environmental assessment on the 2 Mile project. And Daniel, we did comment on this, correct?
Initially, yes. Now we're in a different phase.
We are, but I just wanted to confirm that because it may be pertinent to the next phase. We did provide comments.
I believe we did, yes. We've seen this before.
All right. Yes, it is pertinent. Okay.
You gotta keep it standing.
Jerry, can you update us on where this is in the process? BA has been put out. Is there an appeal period with this EA?
Yeah, there will be a standard. I don't have the specifics on this because I have not been paying much attention to this with the fire burning.
Strange.
So I don't have it. But there are, this is following the specific NEPA process. And as Daniel had mentioned, we're well into this, and we've accepted comments earlier, and things are moving forward. This package that you have in front of you is pretty large and comprehensive, lots of information there, and I really would recommend that folks that are interested in this, that sit down and scrutinize it, look through it. because there is a lot of material. And take a look at the maps and a discussion on some of the roads and the analysis of those roads and what work we'd like to see done for the completion of this project.
Go ahead.
Okay. My question, Jerry, is knowing that that area is within the rim fire, are there...
Question.
That was a good question. Yeah, just exactly where do we stand with this? Because we don't really know. I mean, this environmental assessment needs to be amended a little bit, I'm sure.
Right. Right now, where we're at is trying to deal with the rim fire, and we've not had crews going in. As you heard, the initial environmental area assessment is being done by our BEAR team for emergency issues, and that's where we're focusing right now, is to save life and property. So that's where our initial focus is going to be once we start dealing, and can pull away from the fire response itself. And you've got to remember that even though there may be a containment on this perimeter of the fire, there's lots of fire still burning in different pockets inside that large footprint, and that's going to be taking some time to chase all that down and try to stop it. So yeah, we do expect that there's going to need some adjustments to this 2-mile project, but believe me, at this point we can't turn our attention away from the emergency need to start focusing on what changes need to be to this document.
Don't think we'd want to.
Good.
Well, I have a couple of questions, Jerry. Is one, well, it's not a question. I'm assuming all the thinning projects are probably out right now. They're pretty well thinned. But not only on the 2 mile, the Rogie and the Reynolds projects, all of them are all in this fire area, right? Now, the NEPA's been done on these projects, right? How much is that going to have to change due to the fire? I mean, can we get on the ground faster because these projects have been started, or not?
We don't know. We really don't. And as I mentioned about those islands, and was discussed many times here today, there are lots of those islands that have not burned. We don't know where they all are, and we haven't really had an assessment as to what adjustments we might need to make to projects as we move forward. You've heard the description that Mr. Dietrich had mentioned, that some of the burning that's going on there is very much attuned to a type of prescribed burning. It did stay low to the ground, and it's doing good work. So those areas could, receive a benefit and improvement. We don't know where all of those areas are yet, as opposed to those areas that have severe fire activity in them and really consumed, just about everything that was on the ground. Now, if you've, had a chance to drive out 120 now that corridor is open and take a look across that landscape, you're going to see a real mosaic of green and burnt areas across there. When you look out across the rim of the world, you're going to see some real devastation across there. That area has burned a number of times, and so some of those tree pockets that survived from previous fires are now gone. They've been consumed. So up that Cherry Lake Road area, there are some very severe burned areas there, but in other areas of the forest it isn't as bad, and it's going to take quite a while to assess that. As I mentioned, our BEAR team right now is looking for the emergency response, those things that may cause a loss of life or additional damage to property. That is a process that's going to be going on probably in in conjunction with other Forest Service and other government entities going in and taking a look at different aspects of this fire. And when all that data becomes available, you know, for each of the agencies that have their little part in that, you put that all together and you've got quite a bit to work with. And that's the kind of information that we'll need when it comes back time to visit these projects like 2 Mile.
I had a couple of comments. One of them, you're talking about that area over in Jawbone that burned severely. Granite Creek Basin looks just like it did in when the Granite Creek fire went through it. It looks identical. That area in the Spinning Wheel looks just like it did the last fire that we had out there. It's just deja vu all over again. I guess my biggest concern, because I know we have to revisit NEPA. There's no question we're going to have to revisit NEPA. It's how quickly it can be moved through the hoops that's, to me, the question. And I could be dead wrong, but I wouldn't think that we need to spend a whole lot of time with the archaeologic part of it, because we've already gotten that done. So, you know, and that's a lengthy process sometimes, because there's very few archaeologists to be able to be on the ground, and we need them out there in the places that don't need to be, you know, that haven't been done, rather than redoing stuff we've already done.
My comment is a little bit different, and it may address some of your concerns. And it's with the process and the timing of this, because I've had a couple of calls about some of the roads identified in here being different than the travel management plan. And so since this is a NEPA process, and I will be honest with you, I have not had a chance to really go through this in a very detailed way. But I know a number of constituents are concerned that there is some deviation. And it clearly says that the Forest Service, as of this date, it is instead subject to comment under the objection process pursuant to 36 CFR 218 subparts A and B. Only those who submit timely project-specific written comments during a comment period are eligible to file an objection. Right. Individuals or representatives of an entity submitting comments must sign the comments to verify identity upon request. This letter is dated August 21st, so 30 days would be September 21st. And my concern is that if, not necessarily on the biological values, because I do agree, I think they're going to be having to pull all of those back and redo the NEPA on them because they've changed dramatically. Right. But for the roads and any other, I don't know if there's any other infrastructure changes that need to be addressed. My concern is that we would miss this 30-day deadline, and if it continued forward, then the process is finished. Right. And so, Jerry, I guess that's where I'm looking for some clarification, because I would be hoping that there would be an extension of that 30-day comment period, but since it is specifically listed as the appeal process, correct, I don't know if that can take place. If it cannot, I believe that we should follow up, specifically looking at, we can identify the pieces that we responded to initially, and at least identifying this, because we're going to be under, we won't have the ability to bring this back to our October meeting. The comment period will be up. Right. And so we would basically have to have this agendized for next Tuesday if we were going to be looking at, and I don't think that means that we are appealing it, but I don't believe that we will have the opportunity to appeal if we do not comment in this 30-day period. Am I understanding that correctly, Jerry?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think you're right in that, you know, there's a specific process and time periods set aside for this, but this was signed during the time of the fire, so, you know, things were considered at that time. The the letter went out and a timeline had been set up. And I'm sure that that timeline was set up and this letter was signed with the with review from the Forest Service that that this is an appropriate time span. Now, that being said, I'll be going back with Susan and relaying your concerns about that, and what might be going forward from here will depend on probably a number of factors that she's going to be getting information from. But the NEPA process is going forward as it has initially planned, and that was a decision that was made well after the fire had started.
Right, and so I'm going to say that really is unfortunate. I think that there wasn't some delay in that signatory, on that date, so that the other interested parties would have adequate opportunity to, like you said, this is a very lengthy document, to get through it and be able to respond.
Sherry, do you think Mike and Daniel could get together and draft something relatively quickly?
I am comfortable with that if my fellow supervisor is. Again, I think we have to look closely. They have to be related to the initial comments that we made, but if my memory serves me, we did comment on the roads.
We did comment on the roads.
We did, but I think we have an extenuating circumstance here called rimfire. Okay, and that I think we can, and I think the Forest Service would have to agree that they need to review the applicability of the work that has been done in light of any damage that has been done, which I have to assume is pretty extensive, and rethink this. That should throw the timetable out the window. On the other hand, I am as anxious with the 2-mile area as I am with any other portion, and I don't want to throw out, the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. But I think we should take the time to take a look at it, and while NEPA may be applicable, if we could get the emergency declaration to, shall I say, minimize the things, we do need to get in there and do the things that need to be done there. I don't know how the process changes in this game, but we do need to change the process because 2-mile remains an important area.
Well, you'll remember the conversation with our Bear team representatives on the work that they're going to do. It's going to cover this area. They're going to look at this, and what they're going to be looking at are roads, specifically culvert damage and that sort of thing, to see what immediately needs to be addressed in those areas. And so we're talking about the 2-mile project and the road portion or package of that. The Bear team probably will have some pretty good information to provide to the forest of the kind of impacts that there were to the roads in that area, and whether or not additional work needs to be done, on those road areas. The bigger picture of the project across the landscape and the restoration of that probably is going to change somewhat once we've got a chance to really look out there and see what damage has been done or what mitigations we might be able to do to salvage the project as it stands. But as described in the package here and the project moving forward on those merits are still valid, and depending on what kind of feedback we get of work that needs to be done to either restore the landscape even further or repair those roads that may have had some damage. That information should be coming both from our Bear team and then larger assessments, in geographical areas by our Stanislaus National Forest team that will be going out as well and looking at the ground.
And so I just want to reiterate what our problem is today, is that unfortunately, since this was put out on August 21st after the fire started,
it is subject to 36 CFR 215, which is a regulation that specifically says we have 30 days to submit comments, and it's very specific as to what those comments can be based on our initial comments that we made. And I have had a number of concerns, especially with the infrastructure piece of it, the road piece of it. And Jerry, I appreciate what you're saying. I think there will be a lot of changes, and that's why this timing is very unfortunate. But if we do not submit some form of comment during this 30 days, which puts us out to September 21st, then we will not be in a position to appeal should they continue with some of the changes that were outside of the scope of the travel management plan.
And I hear you, and I agree with that, but if I remember my numbers correctly, rim fire exploded to 4,000 acres on the 19th, about 9,000 acres on the 20th, 16,000 acres on the 21st, 50+ thousand acres on the 22nd, and over 100,000 on the 23rd. When they signed it, I don't even think they knew it was 16,000 acres and growing rapidly. I think the situation is dramatic, and 2 Mile wasn't impacted at that point at all.
No, it wasn't.
And so I think that we need to point that out, and we need to comment on it and say that the document in its current form is not totally applicable and needs major revision, and the process should be revised accordingly. And I think that the forest supervisor and the district, and it's the district ranger who is in a temporary, who kind of doesn't know the territory, but he's learning it fast.
Going to get a lot more from you.
Anyway, I think it's out of the question that this thing is not fully applicable.
Maybe the correspondent should reflect that we need an extension due to the extenuating circumstances of the rim fire. I don't know whether it'll hold any water with NEPA, but that's, something needs to be written, I think, in a very timely manner.
Absolutely, and I think that is the introduction to this piece, but then specifically we need to have a very simple wording about, and if you could coordinate, that captures in just a sentence or two the deviations from the travel management plan and concerns that they be completely reevaluated, especially with the new condition out there and the rim fire burn and the impact that will have. So moved?
So moved.
Okay, so for next Tuesday.
Aye.
For next Tuesday.
This is.
Did that capture?
Well, basically, there's actually two 2 Mile projects.
Two 2 Mile projects.
There's actually two 2 Mile projects. The one was basically the timber one, which was affected more so than this one. This one is basically, I believe, mostly just on the transportation and the roads. Most of what is in there as far as the changes and stuff is good, as far as routing around meadows and stuff and getting the trails back away from sensitive areas. There's also some additions of what the Forest Service calls unauthorized routes that have been out there for years, and those are being included when they were not included in the travel management. There is some change from the travel management from what the travel management actually did to what it is now. And the project, I believe, covers like 24 miles total. 16 miles of that is actual road closure. Some of it is done by changing the road from MLL2 to ML1. Some of it is changing, like Road 2N54 from a vehicle road to a non-motorized trail, which goes from basically from like Hulls Meadows out to Thompson Peak. And those are some of the issues that I've got is they said the private landowner that the road actually goes through did not want OHVs through there. So they changed it and said they would work with them if they would do it as a non-motorized trail. But that route is like 4 miles long. It's 3.83 miles that they're changing. Overall, the project is basically, from our concerns, is a pretty good project. The only thing is the changing of what travel management did and closing some of the routes. Sounds like you've had some concerns from locals that would probably want access to some of those routes that are being closed. So those would be the comments that we would have to look at. As far as my side, I have just a couple of those issues that I brought up. The rest of it is pretty much done. There is going to be a change on some of that stuff because there's a few of those routes were actually overgrown. And they may not be overgrown anymore, so that is where there may be some changes that I see. But overall, it's
There are some good things.
There's good things in it. The extra loss of access. Some of it in along the Clavey River, some of below the Clavey River. Those would be the only real concerns is the extra loss of the access.
So Daniel, maybe you can look at a couple of his specific points, especially if they deviated from the travel management plan.
Yeah, if you could email me specific areas of concern, that'd be appreciated. You know it much better than never been honest with this.
Yeah, I'll do that. I wanted to talk to Jim and Jim a little bit too because they may know some of that area and what thoughts they have on it, because like I said, it's pretty much a pretty good project at this point, and it's just, it was a couple of things that most of it, talking with some of my other colleagues, is they're okay with it, but I'm sure there's locals that have more concern probably with some of the access than I do.
No, I think it was just a couple of those points that deviated from the travel management plan that you hit on. And again, I just want to reemphasize that this, us responding just keeps us in the process. If we don't respond, we're out of the process.
And I talked to Chuck James this morning. I wasn't able to get a hold of Chris Sorensen. I guess he's out on fire line or something. And talked to Chuck James, and he basically felt that this was going to go through just the way it is because it's dealing with the roads and the trails and not most of those. The only other concern I have is what roads or trails that got obliterated by putting in fire lines, etc. And we would want to have those addressed and put back in as they were. That's my main concern right now is how many trails, because we lost several miles of trails on the Ruby burn and stuff because of the burn, and they didn't get put back in. So, but these are designated, so they're supposed to put them back in, but.
Okay. Jim and Jim, could you help without listening to it, providing a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I think that completes the agenda. Yes, a report. So I think we covered it. Does anybody else have anything to report?
Well,
Sharon, I gotta get Rutherford here for that.
Okay, so we didn't take it out further.
We need to get going on that.
I do have one other thing that I forgot during when we were talking about Fish and Game and Wildlife and Forest Service. It's been at least 10 years ago, but I had a tag up in the Tehama country, and they had, I'm not sure if it was an actual fire that had started or whether it was a prescribed burn that kind of got out of hand, but they allowed the hunters in there. We were driving by burning logs and stuff along the roads. So it has been done in other areas, allowing the hunters in. I was really surprised to see how many deer was in that area, even though the fire was still, it wasn't active, real active, but there was logs and stuff that were still burning. They were in there rolling in the ashes and doing that kind of stuff. So that's a comment that I wanted to put in on that side.
Thank you. Any other reports? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.